What's up, friends? Today I'm gonna do something big, and when I say big, I mean literally. This is the biggest canvas I've ever had, and I'm gonna paint it starting from now. But there's one little catch to this entire project. I have about a week and a half to finish it, so I'm super stressed out. Wish me luck. Typically, I don't show the stuff I do for university on this channel, simply because usually the projects are not really mine, like the idea is not mine and I have to try really hard to find any inspiration in it whatsoever. But this time it's so, the idea I have is so good and it's so, yes, it kind of has my vibe to it that I decided I'm gonna record it, because why the hell not? It's gonna be beautiful. I don't think I've ever shown you how I use acrylic on this channel, and that's because I don't actually use it much. I use it mostly for university. I am mainly a watercolor artist, and the technique used with acrylic is very, very different from watercolors, and I have to constantly remind myself about it. When using watercolors, it's always a good idea to preserve the white color of the paper, so artists start with using the lightest colors and then slowly working their way to the dark ones. Acrylic is the absolute opposite. You work from dark to light, and it kind of messes with my mind sometimes. It is also much thicker in consistency and dries quicker, and in general it's kind of an annoying medium, but it can be fun sometimes. Like once you learn how to use its properties to your advantage, then it becomes fun. The process is a bit more complicated though. It's not just, oh, do the dark parts first and then do the light parts. It has a bit more steps, which include the base colors and the underpainting, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. The underpainting is the very first layer of paint you put down, and it's often uniform and diluted to preserve the texture of the canvas and also to just not waste paint. For me, the underpainting sets the entire mood of the artwork, and it helps me with keeping my color palette consistent. I don't know why it works, but it really does. In the past, I would start painting on a black-white canvas, and as a result my colors would look too random and just didn't work together well. But the underpainting fixed that issue. Again, I don't know why it works, but it just does. The composition of this painting is actually vertical, but I put horizontally right now, so it's easier for me to reach those high corners. This made me feel extremely short. Once the underpainting is dry, I do the line art. For this part I use two main colors, a light orange for the rough outline and a darker red for the little details. I'm doing this now because I want to be happy with how my person is placed before I start the background, so I don't have to go back and forth to fix all my mistakes. Acrylic is super easy to fix, just paint over your mistake and you're all good, but I prefer planning things in advance so I don't make the mistake to begin with. This is the watercolor brain that is working right now. By the way, if you want to see the entire process from reference photo to sketches and then the final painting, you should check out my Patreon. It's all there along with other behind the scenes content. As with many things in the very beginning of the painting, the line art doesn't have to be perfect. It can be as rough or as detailed and soft as you need it to be, whatever is comfortable for you. I need the line art just so I know that all my proportions are correct and everything is placed exactly where I want it to be. And then I move on to the background. For the background, I used three main colors: very light peachy, light blue, and metallic silver. I mixed them with a generous amount of a substance called retarder, which is kind of an acrylic additive which increases the drying time. My main inspiration behind this painting is an artist named Anna Maiko. She is incredible. She uses oil paint, and what I find unique about her art is that she uses very rough brush strokes for most of the painting, except for a few focal points where she really goes into small details and makes it very realistic and very natural. It's usually like face or hands or just these, I guess, human details in her painting. It creates this beautiful, dynamic, and soft feeling to her art, and she also uses silver paint for the background of a few of her paintings. I wanted my painting to also have this soft atmosphere, and I used her method as the basis of mine, though I can't fully recreate it because oil and acrylic are very different mediums, and also because we have different art styles, and also because she is just better than me. Using my big gesso brush, which is amazing for this kind of work, I pretty much slapped paint on the canvas in random directions, but it took much more time than you might expect. I had to pay close attention to the balance between the peach color and the blue, and I needed to paint the metallic silver in very strategic locations so it doesn't like overwhelm the composition. And at some point I realized that it's way too vibrant, so I just added white to the entire thing, and I spent like 2 huge tubes of white paint while working on this. I let the background dry overnight, and the next day, probably after work or before, I started working on my character. What I'm doing right now is the very first layer of paint, and its function is to set the values and make sure all the shapes are there, like where they're supposed to be, and also to make sure that my proportions are correct. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, right now we're entering the scary, ugly stage. But just like the underpainting, it helps me keep my color palette consistent and work on the bigger picture rather than getting preoccupied with the small details and losing direction. Like a good example I can bring up of losing direction is, for example, if I just started the face without doing anything else and I completed it and it's perfect, and then I start working on the body and I would just struggle to mix the exact same skin color, or my proportions would be off and I'll have to fix the entire thing. But now I have this one part that is already complete, and it just becomes much more challenging to fix any mistakes I made. So it is better to really look at the big picture and work in like big layers. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly. Basically, just not to get too preoccupied with the tiny small parts and really making sure that I'm working on the entire composition at the same time. I started with his chest and arms, which are the parts that are either fully or partially covered with the fabric, and then got some white and gray paint and started working on the fabric itself, using rough brush strokes and barely blending because at this stage it would be pointless. I will come back to these parts of the painting later and will put more effort into them. I also painted his hands and the bottom part of the painting. Then I moved on to the most important part, his face, laying down the shadows first and slowly working my way to the highlights, making sure that I capture the shape of his eyes and his high cheekbones and the shape of his lips and nose and all of these like very important face features that just make him look like himself. The color I used is a bit far from his actual skin color, but it's okay for now. I will fix that later. Once I was satisfied with the face, I roughly painted his hair, mostly so I know where it should be. And with that, I finished the very first layer. Now I'll have to leave it to dry and I can start adding details tomorrow. The next day starts with me mixing the skin tones. I always find that the most difficult part with acrylic because there are so many colors to the skin and it's hard to mix them all in time before the paint dries. With oil paint, you can make 100 different shades and slowly put them on the canvas in the span of several days, if not weeks. But for acrylic, you have 10 minutes at best to mix your shades, even if you use a retarder. So I always find myself having to remix the colors, and it's not always easy to get the exact shade you need. For my model, he has a soft peachy skin tone with yellowish highlights and blue-gray reflections and dark gray shadows. That's a lot of different colors to mix. I had to work super quickly and with thin layers of diluted paint so I can blend it properly. It was almost like working with watercolors, but a bit more frustrating to be honest. I started with his neck and chest where there aren't too many details, and later moved on to the face. It took me a long time. I had to repaint the entire thing several times because I wasn't satisfied with the colors. When working on the face, I diluted my paint even more and used smaller and softer brushes. I started with the eyes, then the left side of his face, slowly moving to the forehead and nose, then right side of his face, and finish off with the lips and chin. Luckily, the size of the canvas allowed me to go into the tiny details and make his face look quite realistic. Probably the biggest challenge here was keeping a good balance between the shades so his face doesn't turn out too yellow or too red. And also the lips. I really suck at painting lips. I cannot even describe the satisfaction I felt when adding his highlights and eyebrows. I just felt accomplished. It was either the same day or the next, I don't remember at this point, when I started adding details to the fabric. Starting from the deepest and darkest folds, I mixed a combination of black and yellow and also a bit of black and blue to have a variety in the shadows. I did the exact same thing for the white part as well. The white fabric reflects the background a little bit, so it can be completely white except for a few spots. It's also meant to be transparent, so I mixed in skin tones as well. This part is just me adding details for several hours, so I'll just shut up and you enjoy the time lapse. This part is almost the end. And what I'm doing here is blending my character with the background. Well, not exactly blending, but just making sure that they look integrated together and that my character actually belongs in its environment. I'm using my big gesso brush to make very gestural fabric folds for the folds that are farther from us, the viewer, and closer to the background. That way I kind of create this dreamy, eerie feeling I was going for, because it kind of looks like it's fading into the background. But I'm not done yet. I still have the fabric that is at the very front. But at this part, I'm really exiting the ugly stage and kind of starting to fall in love with my creation. I'm especially satisfied with the way the hands turned out. If you're an artist yourself or you have artist friends, you probably know about the bane of our existence, which is drawing hands. It is ridiculously difficult. Yet in this painting, I managed to do that. I love the way the veins turned out and just how the shadows and the lights work together. I like that, and especially when you look at it from afar and not up close like it is right now, it looks very realistic. So yeah, that's probably one of the most satisfying parts in this entire work. Here I'm just finishing off the fabric, adding all the highlights or the parts when it's supposed to be pure white. And also I mixed white with a little bit of yellow to give it a golden look. Additionally, I also mixed white with a lot of thinner just to cover the parts that are too vibrant, the same way as I did with the background. The last thing I have to do now is paint his hair. After this, my work is complete. I wanted his hair to also blend into the background, so I first painted it very roughly and added thin individual hairs on the parts that are closer to his face. I also painted his eyelashes and finished his eyebrows. Hair is typically the last part of a portrait because it's easier to paint once the skin is done. I used my fan brush and a thin brush to create the illusion of many little hairs sticking together. I can honestly say that I'm really proud of how this turned out. I got much better with acrylic and finally learned how to mix skin colors better. The fabric turned out gorgeous and the background is so dreamy. I came into this process with a clear goal in mind and I managed to stick to it. So I am very happy. I kind of hope that I don't wake up a few months from now and realize that, oh my god, this thing is ugly, because I will be heartbroken just thinking of how proud I am right now. I'd honestly say this painting kind of makes me want to explore acrylic more often. As I said, it gets fun once you stop fighting with it and you understand its properties and how to use them to your advantage. But more than anything, I want to learn how to use oil, because once I learn how to use oil paint, I will be unstoppable. Huge thanks to my friend who agreed to be my model. This would not be possible without you. Seriously, I owe you lunch or something. I'm done. The deadline is tomorrow morning. So that was quite a roller coaster, to be honest. I worked for days, with no breaks. I only I went to do my job and school, and that's it. Every time I went home, I was just working on this. It's really I don't really like having such tight time frame, but it's I guess it's kind of motivating in a way. I thrive under the pressure, if you can call this thriving. I'm super stressed out. I really hope I get a good grade for this, because to be honest, I am absolutely in love with this painting. It's so beautiful. Alright friends, that's it for this video. If you liked it, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe for more fun art stuff. If you wish to support what I do, check out my Patreon and my Etsy shop in the description down below, and follow me on Instagram, because that's where I'm most active. Thank you for watching, and stay happy. And now it's time for me to clean up. Damn it.